Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new Nancy Drew analysis video. Today's video is brought to you by the patrons over at Mystique Manor and by all the official Fellow Detective channel members. If you too would like to support the channel and gain access to exclusive features, check out patreon.com/wizardkitten to become a patron, or click join next to the subscribe button to become an official Fellow Detective. For today's Nancy Drew analysis video, I'm bringing you a more exploratory video, doing a deep dive on the technology in the Nancy Drew series and how it has evolved over time. With technology changing so rapidly and drastically throughout Nancy's tenure as a detective, the games almost end up being little time capsules that reveal the limits of technology at the time and its progress. It's also interesting because the technology is sometimes used to enhance plot elements, so let's discuss. This video will be relatively spoiler-free, but will include images and references from across the series. You have been warned. Up until Secret of the Scarlet Hand, the sixth mystery in the series, Nancy Drew is a pen and paper girl. She carries a journal and pen around and jots down some observations, but it isn't until her internship at Beach Hill that Nancy gets technical. She doesn't yet have a phone, but keeps a laptop in her hotel room. This laptop is old school. It's not necessarily that big or bulky, but its features are limited. Nancy can insert floppy disks. You heard me, floppy disks, not even CDs. Secret of the Scarlet Hand released in 2002, and though the first CD drives had been invented in the 80s, they weren't necessarily mainstream until the 1990s. Floppy disks, by comparison, were largely obsolete by the late 90s, so it's interesting that they were still being used in a game released in 2002. However, this might make sense for the characters, given that Nancy uses floppy disks that belonged to Henrik van der Heun, who is older and may have a preference for them. Regardless, the laptop doesn't do much beyond show Word files and documents, and overall is still quite low-tech. In Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, and only in Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, Nancy has a new form of portable technology, a PDA or Personal Digital Assistant. If you're a millennial, then you know that there was a brief period of time where PDAs were so super cool. I remember being so jealous of an older girl in high school who had one. Nancy's PDA, though, pretty limited. It only includes phone numbers and Nancy's case notes, now electronic instead of jotted down in a journal. She can't make calls with the PDA and instead uses the landline phone in Sally's cabin. All in all, not much of an upgrade. The Haunted Carousel sees Nancy ditching the PDA and returning to her trusty laptop, but with a couple upgrades. This version of the laptop has an electronic to-do list, a journal, a memory game, and even email. That's right, folks, Nancy finally connects to the World Wide Web. But that's not all, because the Haunted Carousel also introduced detectives to Nancy's first ever cell phone. A blocky purple number with limited features, but endless nostalgia. The purple phone literally just makes and receives calls, but still pretty cool. The purple phone and laptop join Nancy again in Danger on Deception Island, but the laptop has gotten another upgrade. It doesn't just have email, oh no. Nancy can now use a search engine. And thank goodness, because there's a lot to look up in this game. Technology once again takes a big leap forward in Secret of Shadow Ranch, when Nancy ditches the laptop for good and starts to rely solely on a smarter, if not fully smart, phone. In this game, Nancy upgrades her phone from the chunky purple one to a sleeker silver number. Nancy can use her phone to make calls, but her phone also finally has the capability to search the web. With the internet browser feature, Nancy can look up a variety of topics important to the case, just like she could with the laptop in Danger on Deception Island, but now portable. As Nancy's technology started to improve, the developers had to get more purposeful about how it could be used. If the technology was too powerful, there might be too many plot holes, or the mystery could become too simple. For example, Nancy can't use her phone in the Dry Creek ghost town because she doesn't have any signal. This helps enhance the feeling of isolation at the ghost town, and also serves to force Nancy to go back to other locations, guiding her in the direction of important clues and conversations. When cleverly done, the game technology acts not just as a tool, but also as a story driver. Nancy uses this same phone in Curse of Blackmore Manor and Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. For obvious reasons, Nancy ditches all technology in Secret of the Old Clock, which is set in the 1930s. She also ditches the phone in Danger by Design, the reason being that she can't make international calls from her cell phone and needs to use a calling card with landlines instead. Though international calls using a cell phone were possible at the time of the game's release in 2006, it's possible that it was significantly more expensive and Nancy was being practical. I can't really think of why the developers decided to landlock Nancy again when she could have had the same cell phone. It was already part of the UI, so who knows? Interestingly, in Creature of Kapu Cave, Nancy uses the same silver phone, but loses her web search capabilities. The phone is only able to make calls, which again might be because of long-distance data fees, or more likely, it's because the developers wanted to force players to switch between Nancy and the Hardy Boys to use Big Island Mike's information station at his immersion excursion. A little clunky, but at least here I can see the reasoning. What's interesting is that we never again see the web search feature. This is interesting because by this time, web search and data capabilities were on the rise. By 2007, the iPhone had popularized mobile internet, which means it would have been a much more common cell phone feature in all the games after Kapu Cave. Yet, even throughout the modern era, Nancy never again has web search access on her phone. The answer to this seems fairly obvious. It would have made things too easy. The scaled-back web search abilities that we saw in Shadow Ranch and Blackmore Manor worked because they could reasonably argue that the internet wasn't that powerful yet, and Nancy's cell phone wouldn't just be able to search literally everything. But by 2007, the argument of a scaled-back search feature just wouldn't make much sense anymore. So they decided to forego it entirely, because otherwise, why would Nancy need to read books or ask her phone friends for help? She could just quickly Google her questions like the rest of us. By taking away this option, the developers allowed Nancy to be more present in the mysteries while still maintaining the requisite challenge. Anyway, Nancy continues the trend of having no cell phone in all of the International Renaissance-era games, excluding Shadow at the Water's Edge. Instead of a cell phone, Nancy relies on a landline in White Wolf of Icicle Creek, The Phantom of Venice, The Haunting of Castle Malloy, and Ransom of the Seven Ships. Oddly enough, Nancy does have her cell phone for a brief moment at the beginning of Haunting of Castle Malloy, but she loses it when she crashes her car. Why? I guess to force us to make more trips to the Screaming Banshee Inn. Nancy also gets access to a PDA in The Phantom of Venice, but only for talking to Sofia Leparache. It's interesting that the decision for Nancy to go phone-less was relatively consistent during this era of games, especially since it spanned from 2007 to 2009, a time when cell phones were becoming ubiquitous and were highly sought after. In Legend of the Crystal Skull, Nancy briefly uses a small silver cell phone, only capable of making calls. It sort of seems like an interesting downgrade compared to what she had before, but her biggest technology upgrade of the series comes with Warnings at Waverly Academy, because of course it does. Nancy can't go to an all-girls exclusive boarding school and not have the newest technology, duh. Finally, Nancy gets a legitimate smartphone. This touchscreen phone allows Nancy to make calls, use a camera, set an alarm, receive text messages, and change the settings, including the background picture, color scheme, message sound, and alarm sound. Wow. Honestly, just looking at the huge jump in features makes me think about getting my first customizable phone and how exciting it was. Picking my own background, font, color scheme, and ringtone for the first time was such a millennial milestone moment. Anyway, this is easily Nancy's most sophisticated piece of technology yet, lasting from its debut in Warnings at Waverly Academy all the way to the Captive Curse. The version of the phone in Alibi and Ashes is also remarkably similar, but a little more sleek with bigger buttons, a wider screen, and a journal feature. In fact, the Alibi and Ashes screen is so big it almost looks like a tablet, but it is still a phone. We'll get to tablets later. Tomb of the Lost Queen ushered in a whole new UI, and with it, a whole new smartphone. This phone is basically an upgraded, slightly rounded off version of the previous one. It's a combination of the Renaissance-era smartphone and the one from Alibi and Ashes. Its features remain pretty consistent, allowing for phone calls, a camera, customizable settings, and a built-in hint system on Junior Detective. This piece of technology is the longest lasting of the series, making it all the way to the Shattered Medallion. 5 games might not seem that long, but in the world of technology, it's practically a century. Labyrinth of Lies and Sea of Darkness introduce a sleeker black smartphone with all the same features as the previous one. Its only major difference is that it has a journal feature, but as we've seen in this video, that's not necessarily an exclusive feature. Then Midnight in Salem happened. Like everything else in Midnight in Salem, the cell phone was downgraded. Nancy still has a cell phone, but it's limited to calls, texts, and a camera. Both the calling and texting features are barely useful, but technically the phone does still exist. And finally, in the latest Nancy Drew game, Mystery of the Seven Keys, Nancy upgrades once again. Instead of a simple smartphone, Nancy now has a sort of combination phone and tablet. This tablet largely serves as the game's main UI, with a text message and calling app, a task list feature, a map, a camera, and a gallery for photos. Once again, Nancy still doesn't have open web search capabilities, which seems a lot more conspicuous at this point, seeing as how this game was released in 2024. Nancy does search an article at one point, but only when she has a specific link to access. Nancy also accesses a laptop again, for the first time since Danger on Deception Island. It's not her own laptop, just a borrowed one from Apparat, but still, it's been a while since Nancy actually used a computer. And there you have it, fellow detectives, a deep dive into the technology in the Nancy Drew series. After researching and writing this video, it seems clear to me that the developers were constantly walking a line between realism and functionality. Realistically, Nancy would probably have had more advanced technology in all of her mysteries, would probably still have had her own phone on international cases, and would have made more consistent use of a laptop. Technology often plays a major role in solving mysteries because of its power, allowing detectives to find information that they otherwise would not have access to. Which is exactly why Nancy did not use technology as often. Even though it may have made the games more realistic, it would also likely have introduced too many story challenges or made the games far too easy. To compromise, the developers opted to give Nancy technology, but scale it down by modern standards. Whenever possible, they found a reason to ditch her technology, like the excuse of not having a phone in the international mysteries. All in all, the technology is an interesting element of the series, and probably the one that changed the most from case to case. Nancy's computer and phone changed constantly, while complete changes to the UI happened much more rarely. An interesting artifact from the series, indeed. But what do you think, fellow detectives? Of all Nancy's technology, which one was your favorite, or which one do you think was used most successfully? What do you think about how technology is used in the games? Let a Wizard Kitten know in the comment section down below. If you really enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button or tipping me for the video with a super thanks next to the download button right beneath the video. If you would like to come join a fantastic group of fellow detectives at Mystique Manor as a patron for the channel, gain access to exclusive content, and support the making of more content like this, please check out patreon.com/wizardkitten. I also have channel memberships with exclusive badges and emojis to use during streams and in the comment section. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming an official fellow detective, click join next to the subscribe button. Please feel free to follow the channel on Instagram or Discord, linked in the description box down below. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Cozy Game content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.